Lenni Lenape, and Attawandaron peoples. We honor and respect the history, languages, and culture of the diverse Indigenous peoples who call this territory home. The City of London is currently home to many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people today. As representatives of the people of the City of London, we are grateful to have the opportunity to work and live in this territory. Seeing that we have all members of the committee present, I'll look to move to item number 2, which is our consent items. Please note there are some, excuse me, sorry. I'm going to start with disclosures of pecuniary interest, sorry. Skipping item 1 here. Moving to item number 1, disclosures of pecuniary interest. Looking to the committee to see if there are any disclosures. Okay. Okay, thank you. We'll move to item number 2, our consent items. We have an update on the Blue Blocks transition and next steps. You'll note that there were some added to your packages as well. Before we vote on those items, were there any questions or was anyone looking to pull anything from the consent agenda? Councillor Trosso. Did you want to pull those items? Yes, please. Okay. Just a moment as we get the other items on the screen. So we're just setting up for consent or item 2.1 and 2.4 and pulling out item 2.2 and 2.3.
Through you, Chair, just to confirm, you are pulling out 2.2?
Yes, we're going to pull 2.2.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Trosso, if it's okay to vote by hand on this item when we get to it, thank you. Okay, so we'll look to vote on item 2.1 and 2.4. I'm looking for a mover for this item, these items. Thank you, Councillor McAllister. And seconded by Warren Committee. I need a seconder for 2.1 and 2.4 to put it on the floor.
I so move.
Thank you, Councillor Cuddy. And it will open for voting in a moment. Councillor Trosso, can you vote or do you want to vote by hand?
I'll vote. I will vote yes.
Thank you.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Okay, so we'll look to deal with item 2.2 next. And I know there were some questions or concerns, so I'll look to members of committee to provide their concerns or comments. Thank you.
Through you, Chair. Great.
Go ahead, Councillor Cuddy.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. I've had a number of constituents in my ward voice some concern. And while they are all in favor of the recycling program, they have some concerns because they're a little older and maybe mobility is an issue, and they are concerned about the size of the blue box. They're concerned about how they're going to clean it. There has been some question or maybe some comments about inserts that go in the boxes or special bags that are available. And I was just wondering if we could maybe get some guidance on that so that I could relay that back to my constituents. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll go to Mr. Stafford. Thank you.
Thank you. And through the chair, I believe, if I'm understanding correctly, Councillor Cuddy, your reference is not to the blue box. It would actually be to the green bin. I'd just like to confirm that first.
Yes, my apologies, Mr. Stafford. Thank you.
And through the chair, previous discussions on the green bin have highlighted that there will be opportunities for liners to be placed inside the green bin. We've talked about the possibility of paper bags being in the marketplace. There are also some compostable bags that are used in the marketplace as well. Those decisions will be a homeowner decision to be made, and it is something that we have covered off in previous information, and quite happy to share that information with you directly. It was a part of a previous council report.
Thank you, Mr. Stafford. Sorry, through you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Stafford. I appreciate that. And I would, if you wouldn't mind, maybe we could meet, or we could, you could just forward the information to me and I could forward it on to my constituents.
Thank you. I'll go to Councillor Trasso next, please.
Although others might want to hear that information too, so could you proceed with answering his question directly? Through the chair.
Yeah, please speak through the chair, and please, Mr. Stafford, anything additional to add to that?
Madam Chair, the whole idea of the green bin, and there's a lot of complexities behind it that we've gathered information from other communities. I'd be happy to find the appropriate way to make the previous work available. We will be bringing forward to committee and council some update reports specific to the green bin. Those will be coming possibly as early as February or March. At that time, we'll include additional information. But because of what's occurring with the media and the information and requests that have been made available, I think I'm very open to conversations with individual councillors to help through that. We do have information that is online right now. We have a Get Involved website where we do keep information up to date. So there are a variety of opportunities to bring the community up to date if they've not already received information, and the idea that of new information coming forward, Civic Works Committee will be the first place that we bring forward any new details.
Thank you, Councillor Purple.
Okay, go ahead.
Sorry, I didn't realize you had a follow-up. Go ahead, Councillor Trasso. I'll go to you and then to Councillor.
Okay.
Okay,
Sorry.
Councillor Purple.
Through the chair, thanks for the information. I know the green bin wasn't on the agenda, but more importantly, and I know there are more details to come, but in terms of the trucks, as far as I know, the 16 trucks we were hoping by end of January and start in June or July. Is this still feasible? Are we on track with these two dates?
Through the chair, right now we have confirmation of 13 trucks arriving in the City of London this year. Those will begin to arrive about February, and they'll actually be coming in at about 2 to 3 per month. So we will not have the first 13 available until May. When we have those vehicles, that is still not an opportunity for us to start the green bin program. The best available information we have right now would be a startup in about the October timeframe. We still require the firm delivery dates of the next 13 trucks in order that we can actually roll out the entire program. So part of that will be detailed in our upcoming report, but information right now, our best information available would be a fall startup somewhere in the October-November timeframe.
Okay, thank you. I'll go back to Councillor Trasso.
Yeah, first of all, I don't want to, through the chair, I don't want to seem negative here. I very much appreciate that this is moving forward. But this goes out to the public. There were a number of news stories, and what ends up happening is we get a lot of, I'll speak for myself, I get a lot of questions from people in my ward about not just the blue box, which is actually what's on the agenda today, but also the green bin and also the trash pickup. And I've represented the people that I'm going to ask the questions that are coming into me, because I think that these are questions that are on people's minds. And that is, has the decision about whether or not, with respect to trash pickup, has the decision about whether it'll be every week, every other week, been made by a previous council, or is that still something that's to be determined?
Thank you, Mr. Stafford.
Thank you. And through the chair, that decision has been made, and it was based on the funding that was allocated for this particular program. So the proposed program going forward, and the one that has been funded by council right now, is based on a weekly green bin system, a bi-weekly garbage collection system, and that is consistent with the majority of other municipalities that have these types of services in place in Ontario. And then a final decision will be made on the weekly recycling service. That is something that is seen as desirable, but as our report indicates today, that is an item that we'll be discussing with a group called Circular Materials Ontario. That is the producer responsibility organization that will be leading and paying for recycling services starting in London July 1st.
Okay, well, that's helpful, thank you. So this question about weekly trash pickup, which is generating a lot of the questions that I suspect other people are getting, is off the table. It's a decision that's been made, and it's not something that we're going to be addressing. Is that correct?
Thank you. I'll go to you, Ms. Chair.
Yeah.
If I may, Madam Chair, certainly council can direct us to make a change to any programs or previous approvals, but with the budget that is available, there is no opportunity to continue to provide a weekly service for domestic trash. That would have to be a budget increase, and they would have the lead times to redevelop that program, staff it, and acquire equipment. And I would advise that would be quite an expensive change in multi-year budget.
Okay, that's helpful. Continuing through the chair, it's been represented that there would be a approximately $500,000 annual, if I understand it, savings by the transition to the producer responsibility, and I've seen that in a number of reports. My question is, where or how is that saving being reflected in either the current budget documents that we have or other past budget documents? Because I'd like to just get, I just want to take the opportunity at these meetings to really get as much information as I can out to the public, because these are questions that are coming in. And I guess the other part of that is, would that $500,000 be sufficient to offset those costs that you were just talking about? Or are we talking about something much bigger?
Thank you. I'll go to Mr. Stanford.
Thank you, and through the chair, our report today identifies that when extended producer responsibility fully rolls in, and that'll be by January 1st, 2026, at that point in time, in excess of $4 million per year will be saved for the London taxpayer. That money will be paid for by industry. During the transition period, which starts July 1st of this year and moves on for about a 2.5-year period, we anticipate increased savings each year. For 2023, the amount we believe will be saved will be about $500,000. We're still waiting for the final details, and our report refers to the negotiations that have to occur. The official start date The decision of whether it'll be 42 pickups for recycling or whether it'll be moved to 52 pickups for recycling. These are all details that have to be worked out and be presented back to Civic Works Committee later this year. The notion of the money that comes available from extended producer responsibility will be an item that will be tackled from staff's perspective during the multi-year budget. And obviously between committee and council, any decision on how that money might be allocated in the future will be determined at that point in time.
Thank you. That's all I have for now.
Thank you. Are there any other questions related to item 2.2? Okay, seeing none, I'll look to for a seconder on that item. Councillor McAllister, or sorry, and I'll need a seconder, sorry.
I'll second that, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Cuddy. And we'll open the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. I'll move on to item 2.3, the Neighborhood Connectivity Plan Engagement Strategy, and open it up for discussion with committee. Councillor McAllister.
Madam Chair, if it pleases the committee, Ms. Dan does have a few introductory comments that might be helpful in terms of framing the questions and discussion around the procedure that you should expect to see related to this report in between now and the next Civic Works Committee meeting and at Civic Works.
Sure, thank you.
Thank you, and through the chair, good afternoon, members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to introduce the Neighborhood Connectivity Plan Engagement Strategy Report, which provides an overview of initial outcomes for the trial engagement and what to expect when we present the first 3 recommended plans next cycle at the committee on January 31st. So sidewalks are a critical piece of infrastructure that increase safety, encourage active travel, improve accessibility, reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and benefit all ages and abilities. Planning for sidewalks on both sides of most streets has become standard practice amongst many Ontario municipalities. Walking is an active mode of transportation that has been promoted in London dating back to the early 2000s, and active mobility will remain a priority through the mobility master planning process. 2021 was the first year in which London Plan policy came into effect requiring sidewalks to be included on both sides of most streets. So that means that when a street is due for reconstruction, if there's no existing sidewalk, it should be rebuilt with a sidewalk on at least one side of the street. And as we've moved forward trying to install sidewalks in this way, it has sparked some considerable debate in communities and resulted in some inconsistent application of the policy. It also highlighted for us the need to improve the way we engage with residents and community partners to determine where sidewalks make the most sense while still meeting the goals of the London Plan. So after 2021 saw some considerable street-by-street debate, Council directed Civic Administration to develop a Neighborhood Connectivity Plan, or NCP for short. This approach would implement a community engagement strategy on a trial basis in 2022 to inform our 2023 reconstruction program. By elevating sidewalk discussion through an NCP approach, it provides a mechanism to look beyond individual streets and identify safe travel paths to key neighborhood destinations, services, transit, and active spaces. And by reviewing neighborhood connectivity holistically, sidewalk options can be considered where they will provide the greatest benefit without automatically assuming a sidewalk on every street. The first 3 neighborhoods to undergo the trial NCP engagement process were Glencairn, Grenfell, and White Hills. Feedback from local residents is vital to help us understand each neighborhood's priorities, and our NCP engagement strategy provides multiple ways for community members to participate in shaping their plan. Last summer, we hosted a virtual webinar for residents in each of the neighborhoods, offered a drop-in consultation session, and created a Get Involved website for each neighborhood where people could provide their input through either a survey, general comments, or by dropping pins on an interactive map. We had really robust participation this past year, and that allowed us to gather details on residents' priorities around accessibility, connectivity, and pedestrian infrastructure. Participants from each neighborhood helped identify important community amenities, destinations, and features. They also let us know how they use their neighborhood today and how they'd like to use it in the future. The recommended NCPs, or Neighborhood Connection Plans, have been tailored to each community based on community feedback, our own available technical information, input from local agencies, and London Plan policy. So staff will be presenting those first 3 NCP recommendations and those trial communities at individual public participation meetings on January 31st at our Civic Works agenda. Email notifications will be sent to the residents, giving them details on how to participate, and we'll also be promoting the PPMs on the neighborhood websites and social media. Our goal is to provide residents ample opportunity and notice to comment on the recommended outcomes of our engagement process. Staff's also recommending that we continue this trial into 2013 to allow those first 3 NCPs to complete the full process, go through their public participation meetings, and also further develop our approach for street-level engagement. It's our hope that an NCP approach to sidewalk implementation is one that results in sidewalk connections that make sense for the communities that they serve, while offering an opportunity to learn more about pedestrian experiences and the value of providing safe, convenient, and accessible mobility choices for all residents. So I want to thank you for your consideration of the report, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. I'll go to Councillor McAllister.
Thank you, and through the chair, I just want to applaud the staff so far for the work done. I really do appreciate the NCP, especially the community engagement component. It's very important that we encourage as much public participation and even promotion of the opportunities the public have to participate in this process. And from my point of view and from the feedback I've received, the sidewalks are incredibly important just from a safety perspective. A lot of the time, and I'm sure some of the other councillors receive this as well, we're not necessarily going to have traffic calming measures on every street, but especially with the older neighborhoods, a lot of these were designed without sidewalks. And it's really become a safety concern over the years in terms of location to schools, and I've heard from a number of parents specifically that it's very important that we get this work completed, because in terms of safety and children being able to walk to and from school, it's very dangerous to just walk on these streets. And I look forward to seeing more on this in the future. So I just want to say thank you so far and express the concerns that I've heard. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Shrasa.
Thank you. Through the chair, I should echo everything that was just said. I really do appreciate the extreme amount of work that you've undertaken in this engagement. One question about sidewalks. Is there a way of constructing sidewalks that while they're solid enough to have wheelchairs, for example, on them, have some kind of porous materials that would improve drainage?
Thank you. I'll go to Ms. Scheer.
Absolutely. Thank you, Madam Chair. Certainly porous materials for concrete and parking lots are commonly used in certain applications. Bit challenging for sidewalks because of the nature of the maintenance of those sort of permeable materials. They actually have to be regularly vacuumed out so that they don't silt up and that drainage through the structure works well. So we have been looking at whether or not there's good application for those types of materials in certain locations, particularly around plazas, open spaces, parks. Right now, the technology for full-scale sidewalk implementation is probably not going to give us the right return on investment. There are opportunities, however, to look at low-impact development and other drainage improvements related to sidewalks, and also to minimize the impacts on mature street trees, which does help us with retaining water in the area as well.
Continuing, when will we be able to ascertain when the next set of neighborhoods is going to be looked at? Because people are just sort of sitting there pressing refresh, wondering what's coming up next.
Ms. Dan. Microphone. Got it.
Through the chair, our intention was that we would look at each year to the year ahead and say, what are the neighborhoods where we have works planned anyways that would trigger a sidewalk, and try to get ahead of that by doing an NCP in those neighborhoods. So one of the things I was planning to do ahead of our January 31st meeting was, as part of my 2023 sidewalk list report, propose some areas that we would do as our next 3 that'll then help inform projects that'll happen in 2024. Some of the neighborhoods that were selected this year for our trial NCPs were because we're doing work on those neighborhoods in 2023. And we wanted to use this process to inform whether a sidewalk would be included or not.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McAllister.
Thank you. Through the chair, you did mention it just a moment ago in terms of the matured trees and preserving those. I did notice that I think obviously these plans were, maybe there was a bit of a disconnect in terms of the planting of the trees and now the sidewalks. But in terms of the plans for preserving as many of the trees as we can, especially in the older neighborhoods where there are more mature trees, the curbside sidewalks, is that something in terms of an approach you would take to minimize the removal of as many trees as possible? Or how does that process go in terms of protecting as many as we can? Thank you.
Ms. Stan?
Yes, through the chair. So this is actually stage 1 of our engagement, where we're looking at the neighborhood and creating that blueprint for where sidewalks will go. And we're kind of looking at it at that level. But the intention is to have stage 2 level engagement. So when a street is identified for receiving a sidewalk, in advance of doing the construction and the design, we would actually re-engage with the individuals on that street to talk about the options and what our different design constraints are for that street. So depending on you put it on the east side versus the west side, what would be the impacts to driveways, to trees? What are our options in terms of the benefits of having a boulevard, or do we do a curb face sidewalk? And help the people on the street understand the options that we have to mitigate impacts when we go in to design that. And so we'll look at all those different options as ways to be able to reduce our impacts to trees, to driveways. We also look at our impacts to on-street parking and how that works. So there's a lot of things to consider, and a big part of that is educating the members of the street on the design choices we're making so they understand.
Thank you.
Thank you. Looking at my colleagues online, see if there's any questions.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and through you. I'd like to reiterate what my colleagues have said and thank staff for the fine work that you've done in this area. As the chair and I both know, we're both former school board trustees. We saw a lot of schools in the East End that didn't have sidewalks. One in particular was Evelyn Harrison, and I was very pleased recently to announce to the constituents in the area that they'll be getting sidewalks 2024, and of course the parents are thrilled with that. But I do have a question for that to staff, and is there a way for us to move forward, to move ahead sidewalks that are scheduled? Just in that example, if on Tewksbury, they're scheduled for 2024, is there any way to move that ahead to 2023? I think that's a fairly critical area out there, because the streets are busy, and there are a lot of students, when I say students, Fanshawe students on that street. Traffic's moving quick. Is there a way to move it ahead from its scheduled installation in 2024? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Stan.
I got it. Okay, through the chair. I can speak to sort of how we are going to be looking forward to scheduling the works that are recommended, and then I can maybe pass it off to Mr. McCrae to speak to this year's construction program and the neighborhood sidewalks. So in terms of what you'll be seeing on the 31st will be a recommendation in each of the neighborhoods of the streets where we are suggesting that a sidewalk be going forward. And it actually will include the approximate timeline of where it currently sits on our infrastructural renewal project. Is it within the next 10 years? Is it 10 years plus? Or is it even further out? And so that's an opportunity for us to hear feedback if there's priorities from council that we can take back and look in our future planning for our individual streets. We do have some flexibility in moving some things around. In terms of the 2023 construction year, we do have our program pretty much set, but I will pass it to Mr. Cray to see if there is any opportunities.
Mr. McCrae?
Through the chair, thank you for the feedback. We're certainly interested in that as part of the consultation process. We do have a long list of priorities. Unfortunately, there's a backlog, and the time to deliver each project means that the ones that are planned for 2023 are already underway. Typically, for example, the surveying that needs to get done before the snow covers the ground is done in the fall prior to the year. So it would be challenging to accelerate a project up into the 2023 timeframe, but certainly we're just, our ears are open as far as priorities. We currently have a point system that recognizes things like access to transit and school and origins and destinations, street lighting, other conditions on the street. But your feedback is another consideration for us. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Cuddy, any follow-up?
No, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Van Meerbergen, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair, and through you to staff. I mean, I think we can all agree that in general terms, sidewalks are highly beneficial and indeed desirable. But there are streets, primarily local streets in older neighborhoods where they just don't work when you try to retrofit into lots that were never designed for them. Which are complete with big mature trees and causes a lot of distress in the neighborhood. And as staff have rightly pointed out, in 2021, there were 8 individual streets that were removed from the sidewalk retrofit program because of this distress and the angst that was presented to us on council when trying to retrofit these older streets and older neighborhoods. I had one in my ward. It was completely, in net terms, it was detrimental to the neighborhood to slice through these older lots, which weren't designed. They didn't have the size in many cases, as has been mentioned, big mature trees. It slices driveways into proportions which make it very difficult to park more than one car. So these are the issues that flare up. And yes, in general terms, sidewalks are good. But as I'm stating, and as the point's being made, and I see the point being made by staff, we have to be careful. There are a number of areas in London and a number of streets where a retrofit sidewalk 50 years later just doesn't work. And so I want to confirm with staff that this is indeed a consultative process to allow the will of neighborhoods to be expressed and ultimately determined by neighborhoods, and that we're not setting up some type of mechanism where this is the city more or less trying to go roughshod over neighborhoods. So I would just like confirmation on that.
Okay, Councillor Van Meerbergen, can you rephrase your question a little bit or make it clear what the question is?
Well, as I've just stated, I just wanted to confirm that what we're talking about here and what's being presented to us is indeed a consultative process where neighborhoods have the opportunity to hear the information, but still have the opportunity to push back if they so desire. And ultimately, if council agrees, we don't just necessarily automatically go with additional sidewalks. So that's what I'm trying to determine here. I want to confirm that we're not setting up a mechanism where the city is ultimately going to try and force a sidewalk on a neighborhood which just doesn't need one and doesn't want one.
Thank you. I'll go to Ms. Stan.
Yes, through the chair. And so you've pointed out in 2021, we had a very different experience, and that was because at that time, the policy was being applied on every street. And just following it as is. What we've been trying to do is we heard that a blanket approach, a broad brush approach, wasn't right for every neighborhood or for every street. And by using this approach of looking at the whole neighborhood, we can identify the streets that it makes the best benefit, it provides the most sense to the community. So we look at things like, are there connections to pathways, to parks, to schools and other amenities? We look at the feedback from the communities. But if we have shorter crescents and cul-de-sacs with no connections to other things, we agree that maybe a sidewalk really isn't going to make a lot of sense, and it will have a lot of impact on the streetscape. And so the intent is to be able to look at a community, hear from the public in terms of where they like to walk, where they feel not really safe walking and would like to see sidewalk infrastructure, and come up with a plan that's going to create those critical connections without just randomly putting sidewalks on every street. And the intent is to really kind of create a tailored solution for each neighborhood that's suited to it. The second piece is that we've gone with a public participation component for this, which then allows the public to see how the feedback they provided formed into a recommendation map and come here and provide their feedback to council and to the committee so they have that opportunity to close the loop. So you will all have the chance to hear from the public and hear their thoughts on what we've recommended and what we took away from our consultation process.
Councillor Van Meerbergen, did you have a follow-up?
No, that's fine. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll go to Councillor Purple.
Through the chair, I just want to confirm what was just stated by the staff, because the experience in my ward is exactly what was said. They were all informed, they had the opportunity to speak out, and some of the neighborhoods agreed, some of they didn't. So I do feel that the approach of the city is the right one, and we are giving the neighborhoods the voice. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor McAllister.
Thank you. And through the chair, I'm just wondering also if there's like another stage to this where, if it is determined that a sidewalk isn't necessarily the best approach, but like I said before, safety is such a paramount concern that providing the neighborhood the opportunity to look at other options in terms of whether it's a stop sign, whether there's traffic calming measures, because I think the frustration lies in a lot of the older neighborhoods, and especially when you have those children who are walking to and from school, a lot of the streets have become very fast, and outside of the school zone, it's a free-for-all. And I think, there's some issues in terms of the grade. Some of these properties are at an angle, and I do understand the residents' concerns about not having a sidewalk, but I do think it would be beneficial for us to have that conversation with the community afterwards to say, okay, the sidewalk isn't necessarily suited, but maybe we could provide that neighborhood with something else to address the speeding and the safety concerns. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Dan.
Yes, through the chair. That's something that we actually spoke to community members about. We were there to speak about sidewalks, but we know when you talk about sidewalks, you also end up talking about stop signs, traffic calming, and other measures. And it's not like we're going to say, whoa, we're not talking about that today. We listened to the feedback that we received in that regard as well. In the reports that you'll see next week, there's a couple places where we've actually said, this is what we heard. In addition to these sidewalks, in the future, we will look at opportunities for potentially increasing traffic calming or other measures like that. So we did take a holistic approach, and we're looking at the whole neighborhood and all the ways that we can make connectivity better.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you everyone for the discussion on this item, and thank you for the outreach and the connection with the community on the neighborhood connectivity plan. I think that there's been really strong engagement from staff on this and making sure that it's been very forward-facing, so thank you for that. I will look for a mover and a seconder for the motion provided for item 2.3. Councillor McAllister, seconded by Councillor Trosso. That item's open for voting.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Okay, thank you. We'll move on to item 5, additional business, as there's no item 3 or 4. For item 5.1, we have not to be heard before 12 p.m. delegation from Brendan Samuels, Chair of the Environmental Stewardship and Action Committee, Community Advisory Committee, the first report of the Environmental Stewardship and Action Community Advisory Committee. And I believe Mr. Samuels is online, and you have 5 minutes to present.
Can everybody hear me?
We can hear you. Thank you.
Excellent. I can't seem to turn my video on, but that's okay. I trust some of you know what I look like. Good afternoon. It's nice to meet you. My name is Brendan Samuels. I'm the chair of the Environmental Stewardship and Action Community Advisory Committee. And I'm here on behalf of the membership of my committee to welcome you to your new roles on City Council. Our Community Advisory Committee reports directly to the Civic Works Committee. And over the course of the term, we hope to foster a collaborative, productive working relationship between our two committees. We're prepared to receive and work on items that are hounded down to us via civic administration, but we also hope to have your support when we bring forward ideas, suggestions, and feedback related to our pretty broad mandate. We're committed to listening, to sharing our expertise, asking questions, and supporting community engagement in environmental stewardship and action. The primary reason I'm here today is I want to extend a standing invitation from the Environmental Stewardship and Action Community Advisory Committee to all members of London City Council to attend our meetings moving forward. We meet on the first Wednesday of each month, beginning at 3 p.m. Our committee believes that direct conversations with members of council can provide mutual benefits, improve understanding of topics related to environmental stewardship and action, help to realize emerging opportunities in wards across the city, and ensure that community voices are being heard. We recognize that an environment and climate change lens may be useful for supporting decisions by council on matters outside the purview of the Civic Works Committee. Therefore, in addition to reporting to the Civic Works Committee via civic administration, our committee looks forward to acting as a resource to help advise members of council in general on reaching their goals wherever they see appropriate. Just for your information, our committee is comprised of community representatives with expertise in the following areas. That's climate change planning, biodiversity conservation, sustainable building design, urban forestry, ecological restoration, low impact development, wildlife management, waste management and recycling, energy transitions, public education, engagement, and consultation. And so just recognizing that in the months and years ahead, City Council will need to make important decisions to help London meet its targets under the Climate Emergency Action Plan. We look forward to serving City Council and your committee to the best of our ability. With the remainder of my time, I just wanted to mention something on behalf of my advisory committee as well. At yesterday's Planning and Environment Committee meeting, responding to a delegation from the chair of a separate advisory committee that reports to planning, Deputy Mayor Lewis expressed tentative support for resuming in-person advisory committee meetings, but said that the matter would have to be referred to SPPC. Just to clarify, our advisory committee meetings have been occurring virtually since the start of the pandemic. And being that we're a new advisory committee, a lot of us have never even had the opportunity to meet face-to-face before. And this, I believe, is a hindrance to the productivity of our committee. Many of our members are new to the municipal government, and we have a lot to learn and to teach them moving forwad. And so I would like to reiterate our committee's support for the delegation from Sandy Levin from that other advisory committee. We would like to have advisory committees resume in person if possible. And ideally, if we could facilitate hybrid meetings, just like we're hosting right now, that would really promote accessibility. It would ensure that if people are continuing to get sick during the pandemic, that we're still able to meet quorum. The infrastructure for virtual hybrid meetings already exists at City Hall, and we hope we can use that to the benefit of the advisory committees that serve you guys. The last thing I'll mention is, I think given our working relationship, it would be beneficial if the chairs of advisory committees could have standing delegation status for the committees that we report to. So for instance, if I have something to report on coming back to your committee that I report to, it would be helpful if I didn't necessarily have to get slotted into a later part of the agenda, but instead could simply be fulfilling that standing delegation status. So I realize this is probably going to have to get referred to SPPC for consideration, and staff will report back. It's really good to meet you all, and I am looking forward to working together. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and I look forward to attending an upcoming meeting and for those dates to be shared with the rest of the committee as well. Councillor Chausa.
Yes, thank you for raising that last point, because I was going to ask you to address that directly. The next delegation we have coming in from the Integrated Transportation Advisory Committee explicitly asks this committee to recommend that we have these hybrid meetings. I think that our committee, Civic Works, has jurisdiction over certain advisory committees, and each standing committee has jurisdiction over certain advisory committees. And I would be, I don't want to get too far ahead of myself. I'll raise this when we get to 5.2, but I'm going to take the position that we can make that request for this committee without necessarily going to SPPC, which would be fine to do. But I think every month that the advisory committees do not have the opportunity to engage with each other and come down to City Hall is a lost opportunity. And I feel, as a former advisory committee chair, I feel it's very important that we have these volunteers, these important volunteers, come down to City Hall. And thank you very much for your invitation. I also want to strongly support the notion of standing delegations at the beginning of each meeting. It might not be necessary for that to be exercised every month, but I want to make it easier for the advisory committee chairs and for the city clerk's staff that staffs the advisory committees not to have to go through that additional procedure each month, and it's just assumed. And I would look for guidance there in terms of how that could be done across the board. But I also think this committee can do that on our own. Today, we really did not have a very, very long agenda, but especially with public participation meetings, it might be that we would go quite a while. So I'd like to give the advisory committee chairs the opportunity to come in early in the meeting. And I'm not sure how we legislate that, but that's what I would like to do.
Thank you. I'll go to Ms. Westlake Powers for comment on how we would go about looking at having hybrid meetings, and then perhaps on the second question around standing committees as well, or standing delegations, sorry, thank you.
Thank you. Through the chair, I'd actually like to begin with the request related to a standing delegation status on the agendas, and that's why I had raised my hand to speak to the committee. While on an agenda such as this, that's not inherently problematic, it could be problematic. And what I would suggest is that if we look at the Planning and Environment Committee, for example, where there are routinely many public participation meetings that are scheduled well in advance of an advisory committee meeting, it does become a scheduling problem to have placeholders that aren't used, and then we have a standing committee that needs to recess because they have to wait to a specific time for a public participation meeting. So we have considered that in the past. I will add that the chairs or their representatives from advisory committees do not require to seek delegation status from a standing committee in the same way that general members of the public would. They are afforded that opportunity by right of their appointment if there is a need for them to address the committee. So those are my comments with respect to that. And certainly we're in council's hands with respect to the resumption of in-person and or hybrid meetings. I will advise that we anticipate that there could be some resourcing conflicts related to the resumption of those meetings at this time, but if directed by council, that's the avenue that we will undertake. I'm happy to answer any additional questions if there are any.
Thank you, Councillor Trasa.
Okay, through the chair, I'd just like to ask, in order to get this done as soon as possible, should we ask the city clerk to put this, should we pass a resolution which would go to council, or should we ask SPPC to look at it. I think this is a good discussion we're having here, and I'm glad that this committee is taking leadership on this. But I really want to move this forward.
Thank you. So my understanding is that from watching planning yesterday was that Deputy Mayor Lewis is bringing forward to SPPC some of these concerns from advisory committees around meeting schedules, but we could perhaps ask the same around the delegations as well. If that's satisfactory, we can pass that along from this meeting.
Yes.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments related to item 5.1?
Yes, and through you, Chair. I'd like to thank Mr. Samuels for coming forward and his presentation, and I have a question for him. Are you in contact or do you work with the Upper Thames Conservation Authority? I might have missed it earlier if you'd said you were. I'm on that committee, and that's why I'm asking. Thank you.
We do not report or work directly with UTRCA. However, there is sort of indirect overlap between membership of our committee, various community organizations that are represented, and the UTRCA, particularly their community engagement programming. However, we don't have a formalized relationship.
Thank you. Any additional questions, Councillor Cuddy?
No, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I'll go to Ms. Westlake Power.
Thank you. Through the chair, I just wanted to, as Councillor Trosso has indicated, there is a formal recommendation in the next item on your agenda related to in-person and or hybrid meetings. And it would be my opinion that if the committee so chooses to endorse that, they could add the additional direction that be extended to all advisory committees. And that's probably the most straightforward way to address what has been raised in that formal motion as well as in the presentation.
Thank you. Okay, moving back to item 5.1. So there is a motion in front of us with that item. I'm looking for a mover and a seconder. Councillor McAllister? Looking for a seconder. Councillor Trosso, thank you. Councillor Van Meerbergen? Thanks, we got it.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. We'll move on to item 5.2, the first report of the Integrated Transportation Advisory Committee. The report has been provided for you, and there is a motion included. Looking for any discussion, and then a mover and a seconder. Councillor Trosso?
To the chair, actually. I think we've discussed that. We've heard a recommendation from the clerk. I'm not going to repeat everything I said. I incorporate it by reference in 5.2, and I'll move the recommendation as the clerk was helping us draft. Yeah.
Thank you. So we'll look to move that. Sorry, microphone. Thank you. So we'll look to move that recommendation with some additional language added. We'll just give us a moment to add that in. Councillor McAllister.
Just in regards to this motion, just because it was presented by the Transportation Advisory Committee, whether we should have A, stay as it is because they're actually requesting it, and then B, have that as all committees, because, you know, I don't want to take away something that this committee has specifically asked for, that we're adding in. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll try to capture that. Okay, thank you. So 5.2, the motion has been updated and is available if you refresh your screen. And clause D has been added, looking for a mover and seconder.
Through you, Chair, I'll move that motion.
Thank you, Councillor Cuddy and Councillor McAllister. Thank you. We've opened the vote. Councillor Van Meerbergen.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. Thanks for your patience, everyone, with that last addition to the motion. With that, we'll look to adjourn. Looking for a committee to weigh in on adjournment. Thank you, everyone. Hope you have a good rest of your afternoon, and hope to see some of you in committee later. Thanks.